healing isn't the absence of distress or pain. I think it's like your capacity increases and you're able to tolerate and metabolize it. So I thought awareness alone would fix everything. And no, it doesn't. Insight came really quickly for me, but I think intellectualizing it did not immediately like translate into the behavior, which was hard for me, right? Because I like want a quick fix, like do it now. You assume that when you evolve, the system around you is going to evolve with you. Not so. Instead, growth disrupts dynamics. And that's we have to understand that individuation is definitely going to create tension before you're going to feel aligned. I now understand that boundaries is not a rejection, right? It feels like sometimes you're setting limits that kind of leads to abandonment because you're kind of separating. But no, boundaries is just a structural support and it's necessary for safety and self respect. Boundaries is the place at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And I think that's a good way to explain it. So, in reality, my boundaries have made me more direct. As I've reclaimed my voice, some relationships are uncomfortable. And that discomfort was not regression, it just made me recalibrate how I show up to the relationship. Spiritual growth, emotional health, they are not the same. Untangling religious conditioning, it actually required me to differentiate faith from fear, devotion from compliance, and belief from identity. That separation was destabilizing, but it was necessary. And I'm happy that I went through the process. Again, always trying to minimize that, but that pain is necessary to help you go through it because the only way out is through. So I assumed that, like in the beginning, I would feel empowered, but I didn't at first. I felt lonely. I still feel lonely some days. And as I dismantled all those narratives, it helped me restructure my internal foundation. There were and are seasons of isolation before I think I started to expand my circle. Self love, that was just a starting point. I now understand that self respect had to precede the self love. Without the behavioral alignment, without keeping promises to myself, affirmations often felt hollow for me. So I could have all the post-its I want on my mirror, but if I am not learning to like hold that internal structure and be firm about it, the post-its aren't going to really matter. I experienced what my nervous system probably perceived as overload because I was restructuring my identity. And what felt like it was collapse was actually just my body actually recalibrating itself. Growth is something that, yes, it is painful. Yes, it is necessary. But I will tell you this, it happens in cycles and it happens in circles. Definitely not linear. A lot of times in healing work, I notice that people get scared and they feel nervous to face themselves. Essentially, like, and I don't want to necessarily get too deep into this because there'll be more content later about this, but growth requires your ego dying. And a lot of times when we talk about ego, what we've been taught that that word means is arrogance, pride, like, oh, you have such a big ego. And it does mean that in some cases, but the way in which I'm referring to ego is the false sense of self. And so, what all of us do, and none of us are exempt from, is that we build up this false sense of self, the place at which we wear this mask. That is what we put on when we go out into the world to kind of like somehow make the world feel safer and to make us feel internally more, I guess I would say, protected. Um, and so people, when they're doing work, whether it's in coaching, whether it's in therapy, or just by themselves, they start to feel very afraid because Growth requires a death of your ego, a death of the mask that you've put on. It requires fully being able to like take down that mask, look yourself in the mirror. And also, by the way, your relationships that you're in are also serving as a mirror. And so that ego death is very frightening because it is the one thing that has protected you for your entire life. It is that false sense of self that we have relied on to keep us emotionally protected from people outside of ourselves seeing us as we truly are. Hell, in fact, it's kept us sometimes for seeing us for who we truly are. And so the reliance on that is something that is so ingrained in who we have become and who we have made ourselves believe that we are, and that dependence on that. We've relied so heavily on it. So I do see clients, and just people on my platform that they're like afraid to heal because they don't want that death of that ego to happen. But I will say this once, I'll say this 1,000 times over. Again, growth is not linear, does not happen in a straight line. So, like all of a sudden, like something happens to me in my life and it, requires a portion, right, of my ego to die. Your ego is not just going to die altogether. It's psychologically impossible because our brain, our psyche protects us and only is revealing what we're able to handle in the moment. So, legitimately, like I went through my process of healing, not linearly, I went through it in cycles. And so, as soon as that one cycle was achieved, guess what? I was able to live a little bit, breathe a little bit, and then guess what? Here came another cycle. So it was ready to be acknowledged. It was ready to be seen. It was ready to be healed. And so I say, not only does it happen in cycles, but it also happens in circles. Here's why. Because when your healing actually is taking place and taking root, and that ego death is happening on a cyclical basis, you will not only go around the mulberry bush in this cycle or this circle, but you return back to the place that once triggered you, that once caused you so much pain with a fresh perspective. And that, my friend, is the beauty of healing in cycles and circles. Another thing to add about my healing journey in particular, but just a healing journey of any individual, is like, I don't think we ever arrive. Like, we never really get to like this mountaintop. I mean, I'm sure that we've all seen like all of these micro influencers, macro influencers, right? That talk about like, hey, I'm up here now. Look at me. I'm on the mountaintop and you can come up just like me if you do these 5 things. Beautiful, great, respect my peers and my colleagues. I do. But the reality of it is that there is no real like arriving to the mountaintop. Because again, cycles and circles. And so as long as we come into this mindset of I'm done evolving, well then what's the point of continuing on and living? Right? And so the whole point of this earth school, right, that we are all a part of and have been sent here to learn and pay forward these life lessons is that there is no arriving to the mountaintop. Like once you get to one peak, you're going to have another one to go and another level of awareness, another layer of like coming into more knowledge and more information. And so I feel like for me, the one important thing I want to leave you with on this particular note is that healing for me never was about me becoming a better version of Akia. It has always been for me becoming the version of myself that I always was, right? Because we are all assigned to these systems, whether it's a familial system that has a hierarchy, a religious system that has a hierarchy, a societal, socioeconomic kind of a situation that has a hierarchy, that teaches us or gives us or assigns us a role. And that shows us that, like, this is who you are, this is how you're supposed to or should show up, which then automatically, as I've said in previous, right, takes away the coulds, which is the possibilities, right, live in the coulds, not in the shoulds. And so I think what I would say is focus more about or on not necessarily becoming a better version of who you are now, but a better version of who you were always meant to be. That is the takeaway, friend. Becoming who you were always meant to be. That is healing and that is growth. I'm Akia Red. If this was impactful for you or inspiring, please follow me or subscribe to me on YouTube, Instagram, and Substack.